And I have with me today Tari Garner, who also serves on the MOSHAPE Board of Directors and is the Central District President for Shape America. Tari has 38 years of teaching experience in physical education and adaptive physical education. She also has 20 years of high school level coaching experiences in 2 sports. Tari is currently the adaptive specialist with the Missouri State School for Severely Disabled. Tari holds positions at the national position as well as the SHAPE District President, as I just said. Tari and she strongly, and she'll let you know in this presentation, she strongly believes in health and physical education for all students and works to promote an inclusive environment in all that she does. Tari, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. And that was a great intro. Thank you so much. It was perfect. Okay.
You're welcome.
Here we go. Let me tell you a little bit about what I'm doing and why. So I currently, as Sean said, I'm an adaptive specialist at the State School for Severely Disabled. We have 47 students, 47 or 48. I think we have a new one starting this week. And we have ages 5 to 21. And all of our students, obviously, due to the name of our school, are severely disabled. So they have a lot going on, and I am their physical education teacher, which is the best job in the school by a long shot. So that's my school, and we work so hard to really offer our students the best opportunity for education and the best opportunity for physical education and a healthy and active lifestyle. As Sean said, I taught adapted in the public schools. I was there for a long time. 38 years is a really long time. But I've worked in and out of adapted all 38 years. And I just have a real heart for that population and feel like it's so important to include all students in everything that we do. Okay, next slide. Let's go. So we're going to start with our goals for all of our students. And you guys have these goals, but I want us to be mindful of these goals before we talk about some of the strategies and tips for inclusive practices. So when we're talking about our students, regardless of what scenario you work in, and regardless of whether you're face-to-face, you're virtual, or you're in a hybrid situation, we want all our students engaged. And our goal as physical educators is to have MVPA, moderate to vigorous physical activity, for 50% of the time that we're with our students. And that becomes a little more challenging if you're in a virtual or a hybrid situation, but it can be done, as I'm sure some of you are doing that right now. We want all of our students provided opportunities to participate and practice skills. And we know sometimes our students with disabilities, they're more likely to be put on the sidelines or not as included in physical education. And we want to work really hard to include them at whatever level possible, depending on their individual situations. And of course, we want all of our students to enjoy physical education and physical activity. And we want our students to be motivated to participate in activity outside of school, because the reason that we are doing what we're doing is to encourage lifelong active learners. So we want to keep these goals in mind. And I always start with what I call the basics. And these are what I think is important for every classroom to include all students. We need to have boundaries and routines, and I'm sure you have your own. And if at all possible, we need to include our students in the development of those boundaries and those routines. And we all know this. We're going to get more involvement from all of our students if we're prepared and we're ready to go at the very beginning of class. So if we know what we're doing and we're ready, our students are more likely to come in and be engaged and involved. So A is activity from the get-go. We all have stop and start signals. I have some that are really annoying that my students don't necessarily like, but they're effective, right? So whether it's music, whether it's I have what we call a squistle, and that's so I can talk and whistle at the same time. That's pretty creative. It definitely gets their attention. And my students that are mobile tend to grab that and throw it or hide it. So they don't really like it because I can talk and whistle at the same time, but that's one of my stop and start signals. I love music because I think it engages. I know Sean likes music too, don't you, Sean? It engages our students, right? So I let them use their music if appropriate for school in those stop and start signals. The I is involvement by all. And you guys, we're probably better at it than anybody else in our building. In physical education, we adapt and we adjust and we overcome and we do this constantly. You like how I got that adapt and overcome in there? Sean's granted. But it's important that we include all our students and we try our very best to involve all students all the time. I don't really give my students an option. They know that my expectation is they are as involved as possible the entire class. So it's not really optional. We don't even have that option. Concise instructional clues. This is the C of basics. We want to be direct and we want to be, I think that I meant to put cues in there, but clues works. We want to be direct and we want to be concise because that's more effective and that also impacts the moderate to vigorous physical activity. If we're concise and direct, that leaves more time for activity. So I have to really work at that one because I like to talk and sometimes I talk too much. So when I'm evaluated in my presentations, one of the things that comes back is you need to be more concise and more direct. So that's something I work hard on. And supervision and feedback. It's important to give quality feedback. We want to be honest and we want to be specific. And we want to, we're supposed to give positive feedback. The ratio is 3-1. So I want to give 3 positive, encouraging types of feedback to maybe 1 corrective, constructive feedback. So 3-1 in how I approach those students. Let's see, there was something else on that. Honest, direct, and specific. I think we're good. We're ready to move on. So these are just some of Terry's ideas about creating an inclusive environment. I always use student first language. So if Sean is my student, and maybe Sean is a student with autism, he is not an autistic student because see the switch? He is a student, my student first, that has autism. Or if I have a student that uses a supportive device of some kind, a walker, a wheelchair, it's not a wheelchair student, it's a student with an assistive device or a student that uses a wheelchair. Just some simple shifts in how we say things. And we always want to put that student first. And this is a big one. See the possibilities, not the disabilities. When working with students with special situations, you always want to learn as much as you can about their situation. Know everything you can about their specific disability. Then you put that aside and you look at the possibilities. You don't see the disability, put that to the side. You know it, you understand it, but now you want to look at the possibilities. So And this is important too. When you recognize the possibilities and the students are engaged and active, you want to include the students in any kind of adaptations when appropriate. Now, there are times that that probably wouldn't be appropriate, but if and when the students need to be engaged in those adaptations. And I talked about this earlier because I think physical educators, health educators do a great job of adapting. But there's a lot that we can adapt. We can adapt rules, we can adapt instruction, we can adapt the activity, the environment, the implements. There's a lot we can do to create engagement. And you know what? Sometimes it's trial and error. If it doesn't work, try something else. Not everything is going to be perfect when you try it. I learned that a long time ago, and I continue to learn it after 38 years. Um, Talk to and teach your students about inclusion. This is really important, and you have to do this with sensitivity, but your students need to understand how important it is to include everyone in the classroom. So I think it's, we talked about, I'm going to talk a little bit later about teaching about character. Character matters. We need to teach about inclusion and the importance of that. Okay, next slide. I mentioned this, but general adaptations, differentiated instruction, we do this all day, every day when we're teaching because our students come to us. We might have 40 students in a class at all different levels. So we've got to find ways to differentiate the instruction and to address the needs, the interests, and the abilities of all students. In my classroom now, that is probably the most challenging aspect because I have some students that are mobile, and then I have students that are not very mobile at all and have to do a lot of hand under hand or hand over hand activities. So trying to make sure that every student is really challenged to the best of their ability. I mean, it keeps me hopping all day long. And I know it does you too, but it's really important because that's the difference between an effective and an engaged classroom versus one that's not as effective. So look at those. Just think about all the possibilities, right? The types of equipment, there's so much stuff out there. Boundaries, activity areas, the time factor. Do we even need it? Take it out. Try it without a time factor. Rules, your prompts, your cues, the action, maybe the complete action is going to change. I sometimes think we get so focused on doing it a certain way that we forget to think outside the box and just realize all the possibilities. And that just, if we do realize those possibilities, that makes our classroom so much, it's just so much more engaging and so very rich. When you teach, I put this up here just so I would remind myself to talk about different types of delivery. When you're working with a variety of students, make sure you have your verbal, your visual. And with my students, I use a lot of visual schedules and icons. So it's so much fun because I made icons of everything you could imagine so that I can show them and they can see the possibilities for what we're going to do that day. And I have a big board in my classroom that always has an icon that shows our warm up, our activity, and our cool down. And our students, that's part of that routine and boundary. My students come to class, they know the first thing we're going to talk about is what we're going to do in class that day and why we're going to do it. So your students understanding the why of what you're doing is really, really important. I'm going to talk about something else here while Sean's changing the slide. It's really important for students to have choice and to be able to create. And you can do that in a face-to-face, you can do that in a virtual setting, you can do that in a hybrid setting. You can group in a virtual, just like you would if you were face-to-face and had your students all together. So student choice and student creation, allowing them to create. They choose, they create, it increases engagement, and it creates a climate of inclusiveness in your classes. When you have students working together and creating together, that just brings them together, and they recognize each other's strengths and what they offer to that group that's going to create. It's awesome. And I know you've probably seen it, but every time I see it, I just think it's amazing. So why SEL, social and emotional learning for inclusion? And you guys all know about CASEL. We've all heard about CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. They talk about the 5 behavioral competencies. So self-awareness, social awareness, relationship skills, self-management, and responsible decision-making. These are all part of what we do in health and physical education, and they should be part of every classroom. And I gotta put this out there for Health Moves Minds, because Health Moves Minds curriculum is all about social and emotional learning for our students. And I have adapted that curriculum to work with my students with severe disabilities. So when I talk about Health Moves Minds, I say it is for everyone. Everyone can use the Health Moves Minds curriculum. And you know what? I know this sounds like a sales pitch, but it's free, folks. So if you haven't signed up and you don't have access to all that curriculum, get your patooties in gear and get that curriculum, because it is awesome. And I'll talk about it again later, but I want you to use that because it changes your classroom. It changes the climate of your classroom, and it changes the climate of your entire school, and it can reach out into your whole community. So that's what we're all about. We want everybody engaged and involved. So SEL in practice, set the stage. You want to create a climate of acceptance and inclusion. And we've been talking about that this whole time, right? We want to use words that heal, not words that hurt. As educators, we have to be the role models. We can't be talking about Missy down the hall and saying something negative about her in front of our students if we're going to be that positive role model and we're going to talk about acceptance and inclusion. We have to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. So we can't just, we got to be that role model. We got to do the right thing and try to promote, and we have to just be cautious of what we're doing and make sure that we're promoting the right things. You know, this is important. We want to teach the behaviors that you want to see. We should never assume that our students understand and are learning everything that they need to learn elsewhere. So in my class, Character Matters, we teach a lot of different and talk about a lot of different things. We talk about responsibility, we talk about respect, we talk about acceptance, and we might use a T-chart, and might be something as simple as, what does acceptance in physical education look like? What does it sound like for our class? And how does it impact our community and our class? So I think teaching those and practicing those behaviors are just a really important part of what we should be doing in health and physical education. So if you remember nothing else, character matters, right? Sensitivity, I've mentioned this earlier, to students and culture. And we need to check our biases and make sure that we're not having our own misconceptions about, for example, socioeconomic areas. All of our students are dealing with difficult or concerning situations. It doesn't matter where they're from, who they are. All of our students need social and emotional support. And on the next slide, one of the things that I think is important to talk to your students about is resiliency. And I have a friend, Dr. Wayne Sotil. He's from North Carolina. He actually did some work with my husband at the hospital level talking about resiliency. So we all have challenges. Resiliency is the ability to overcome those challenges. How do we bounce back? And he talks about, this is not my thing, this is Dr. Sotil's thing. He talks about ratio of hassles to uplifts. So how many hassles do we have a day? How many uplifts do we have a day? Sean gave me some great uplifts right before this session. He made me laugh, and I was feeling a little anxious coming from school and running from one thing to the next. And he made me laugh and relax, and he gave me that uplift. And we, as teachers and mentors, we know that we're one of the protective factors, right? Caring relationships is what our students need. Those protective factors make a difference in their lives. So I listed some of the protective factors there: caring relationships with teachers and mentors, consistent structures and routines. You've heard that before in just the last few minutes. Communication and understanding, listening to the stories of our students, and creating an opportunity for them to listen to one another is huge. Telling students the strengths that you see in them, and then offering our students opportunities to help and to serve others. And I'm going to take that back to the Health Moves Mind curriculum, because Health Moves Minds curriculum. Whew, that's a mouthful. How about we say HMM curriculum? One of the opportunities, if you do choose to do some type of fundraising at your school, is to give back to a local organization or a nonprofit. And we do that at my school in our event last year, and we chose Pets for Life. Pets for Life has therapy pets that will actually come to your school and interact with students. It's an awesome opportunity. So for us, we chose them. It was a perfect fit for us. But those protective factors, those are huge, and we need to keep those in our mind as we're doing our teaching and our curriculum. And we need to remind ourselves that as teachers and mentors, we have a huge impact on the lives of our students. So that brings us back to, through all of these different ways, it brings us back to our goals. I just always start and finish with our goals for all students. It brings us back, are we engaging all of our students? What are we doing to really engage them? And we talked about some ways to do that. All students are provided the same opportunities to practice and participate in the skills, and that our students have fun and enjoy what they're doing, and that they're motivated to participate not only in school, because our goal is for them to continue those practices outside of school. We want lifelong learners in health and physical education. So that's what I have for you in our short amount of time together. I hope there's something that will stick with you and that you can put into practice. And I have my contact there at my state school. And then if you would love to follow me on Twitter, I would love to have you follow me and I will follow you.
So Terry, before we let you go, you mentioned, excuse me, Health Moves Minds as a resource. You mentioned a book. When we spoke earlier, you talked about a particular book that you have.
So you guys, I don't get any kickback on this, so I'm not, but I did have the opportunity to contribute as an author. It's called the Inclusive PE Guidebook, and I will get a link to Sean. It can be purchased through Sport Time or Gopher PE, so Spark PE, a part of Gopher. So I just wanted to mention that because if you do have students that you're struggling to include in your activities, the thing that this guidebook has is all kinds of resources for adapting all those different things we talked about. The lessons, the equipment, the environment. So it gives you specifics, and it also talks about specific disabilities. And there's disability fact sheets. And then the coolest part of this book, as far as I'm concerned, it's written from, there's a section written from the student's perspective. So for example, it might be what your student with autism wishes you knew. And I think that's just a really cool way to think about it. So that part's in there. There's assessments, there's how to teach social skills. There's a lot of different aspects of that book. And if it were me, I would have one at every district in the state. So it's just a great opportunity.
And lastly, because part of the topic of this, of these presentations are, what can MOSHAPE do to support those adaptive physical education teachers, future adaptive physical education teachers, and what you do and what they do moving ahead?
I think the most important thing is to find connections with other people, and MOSHAPE is amazing at bringing people together. So they're at our conventions and at our virtual convention, which is a couple days away. It's coming up really soon. There's presentations that are specific to adaptive physical education. So I would like for you to engage in MOSHAPE and if and when, I know it'll be when we get to go face to face again to convention, there's a whole track for adaptive physical education. You can also, on Facebook and Twitter, there's adaptive physical education groups. I gotta give a shout out to our National Adaptive Teacher of the Year, Jody Duff, because I follow her. She has the most amazing examples of inclusive practices on her Twitter account. So, and I will retweet her stuff. So follow me, follow Jody, get with those groups and engage with people that are working towards the same goals. That's just really important in everything we do.
Thank you. And it is, yes, a matter of when we see each other again at a convention face to face. So thank you, Terry. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Sean. It was great to see you, even virtually.
Right, always.